Adriel, welcome back to the show. It's always exciting to do round two interviews. What's going on?
Yeah, man, it's very good to be here. What'd you tell me? I asked you earlier what's going on. You're like everything and nothing all.
Pretty
So
much.
same, right back at you.
I was like, you asked me for a list of 100 updates, could come up with 100 things to tell you. You asked me for one, and I'll distill it down for you. So just one of those people doing a lot of things all the time.
Yeah, I have a 3-month-old daughter, and she is normally a very good sleeper. Last night, I'd give her a B minus. So basically, the podcast could turn into anything, and I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen. Like, we'll blame her regardless.
I'll put at the outset the catalyst for you reaching out for this to come back on the agenda for all of us is a new book. So we do have a focus of the conversation, not just been a while, let's catch up. We do have a thing in specific coming out. Tell me the high level elevator pitch of the book. So at least we start the conversation out with what we came here to do.
Yeah, it's a good start. So the book's called Attainable Sustainability, Building Your Corporate Climate Strategy. Basically, book targeted at executives in the small and mid cap business who are trying to figure out climate regulation, trying to figure out what companies are asking from them when they're talking about climate, trying to figure out how to comply with all this stuff, do it really well, do it strategically, make it a profitable venture and manage like some cost situation. And it's also focused on people who want to get into the climate space. Thousands of students and people working and entrepreneurs and people working in businesses. We do who knows what, but also want to take some sort of impact against climate change. This book is basically their guide to figure out what can you actually do? What do the best companies do? How do you get started? How do you make it profitable, useful, beneficial to the company from 0 to 1?
That makes sense. So not necessarily what to do, like in terms of your own personal, let's call them like consumption habits, but in terms of like, this is the path to working on this problem through the business world.
Yeah. I mean, as we speak, exactly. So it's not about your personal carbon footprint. Yeah. You let the meet or take the train instead of drive. Do all those things, but that's another book. If you want that, there's a great book called How Bad Are Bananas? That targeted at individuals. This was like actually, as we record this today, it's Friday, September 15th. The last 2 days, it's been really popular. I don't know if you saw the Apple sustainability segment that they had from their big annual conference. The CEO and a bunch of executives came together and they had that Access Octavia Spencer, like Act of Mother Nature, and Apple talked about all their sustainability initiatives and how their stores are carbon neutral and how they use renewable energy and how they're reducing water use in every office and every product and how they're doing all of these things across the supply chain. Apple has a team of, 50 or 100 people working on their sustainability team, from supply chain to material sciences to marketing to their stores, figuring all that stuff out. Smaller businesses that have a market cap of 100 million to 10 billion have to do the same kind of stuff because investors want to see it, their customers want to see it, employees want to see it, regulators want to see it, but they don't have nearly as many resources. So this book's kind of a guide to how do those companies do as well as Apple is doing, and they're getting an insane amount of press for their current sustainability work. How do you do that with many fewer resources?
Yeah. I don't want to come across as on the attack. This is a lot of curiosity type questions and a lot of, and I'm not going to come in here saying I have strong opinions or strong knowledge. There's a lot of things they don't know. And this isn't something I study closely, right? So it kind of positions me in a good position to be a host on this, right? Or to be a interviewer rather than I'm very unprepared to sit in your shoes on this interview. I think, there's no like specific place to start with it. I think in general, one framing question, just your definition of sustainability, right? The book talks a lot about carbon, but it's not just about carbon, right? You talked about water and energy, which is related to carbon, obviously. And then also the materials involved in producing a physical product and things like that. So your view on sustainability, is it just about less resource consumption across the board? Or like, how do you define the sustainability strategy? It's not just about carbon, but it's mostly about carbon. That's like a very confusing question to me.
No, it's a good question. I'll say two things. I say often that there's no such thing as sustainable, but sustainability is very clear. It's just the path and progress. Like there's no endpoint to this. It's not like you do these 7 things and snap your fingers, you are now sustainable and you get a special badge for that. So like this, there's always going to be progress to be made. So that progress is really, really important. So sustainability is about constant improvement in a bunch of different areas. your second part of that question is carbon the main thing, the only thing? Should we talk about exclusively carbon or not carbon? A lot of this is measured. You talk about corporate carbon emissions, which is basically all of the things you do as a business, all your office space, your business travel, products you make and sell, the energy use you have, the t-shirts you buy new employees. All of that has some sort of impact on the environment. And impact can be measured in a lot of different ways. If you're a restaurant and you sell food, you might want to measure the methane produced from the cows on the farms before they're butchered. If you're any sort of business and you travel, or to be a better example, you have a refrigerator in your office that releases what's called F gases, which is like a refrigerant. You have all of these different things. They're just complicated and no one knows what all the details are. Do you talk about methane, about nitrogen, about F gases? How do you compare them all? So the corporate carbon accounting methodology, like how do you measure all this stuff, basically came up with something called CO2e, carbon dioxide equivalents, which is to say all the stuff that you do as a business, all the methane you release, the water that comes out of your spigots, the energy you use measured in kilowatt hours, the t-shirts you buy, all that stuff comes together to do what's called create your carbon emissions in carbon dioxide equivalent. So when you see businesses say my carbon footprint is 10,000 metric tons, that is 10,000 metric tons of CO2e, carbon dioxide equivalents, which is a combination of all these different things. So carbon is not the only issue that we should be talking about. It is one of many issues. Some things are difficult to measure in terms of carbon, such as waste can be tricky, or like electric recycling can be tricky to measure in terms of carbon. But many things can be transposed into a measurement of carbon. That just helps us all speak the same language. If you're a financial accountant, you always want to talk in US dollars, no matter where you're trading globally. If you are a carbon accountant or you work in sustainability, make life a lot easier to speak in terms of CO2e. So anybody working on this from a corporate perspective should understand CO2e is just a kind of some additions, some multiplications, some subtraction, bringing all the different emissions into carbon units.
So another score is ESG. And what's the objectivity of that score being like just a number? Because it's a composite of the three components. And yeah, what's the objectivity versus subjectivity of ESG?
Yeah, so ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. It's basically the idea that all these things need to come together to build a better for the planet business. ESG was a term that the United Nations kind of coined in 2004 and said, like, if we kind of come up with this framework, then we'll be able to talk to companies in a language everybody understands. Because do good for the planet is kind of confusing. Do good for your community that can be interpreted in lots of ways. ESG is just a catch-up. There's not often an ESG score in the same way that you get a carbon footprint score. Carbon footprint's a number. You guys have your business, you fly, you have offices, you buy swag. I can tell you the number of emissions that you guys generate. If you want to be carbon neutral, I can tell you the number of offsets you want to buy. I can tell you the price per ton you should pay. The E side of it, especially when it comes to carbon accounting, is measured. The rest of it is very difficult to measure because it means so many different things to many different businesses. But they're really, really important to investors and regulators, especially investors. So you have lots of these huge data groups, companies like Morningstar and BlackRock, who want to understand how you're performing against certain ESG metrics. And while the score is not super clear, you don't get a B+ or a C- on an ESG score. You do want to be working on all these things. You report to different frameworks. There's things called CVP, things called EcoVadis. This is like what investors are using to try to turn ESG into a score. But I would think about ESG as a score. ESG is more of a framework, a topic of conversation, some guiding principles that investors and corporate executives care about. One part of that is the E, the environmental side, and one part of that is carbon accounting and measuring your carbon emissions.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think because I agree with you that the E part makes sense. It's kind of like, how many resources do you use? And if we say there's a way to turn everything into carbon or the equivalent of carbon, then if that's important to you for whatever reason, in terms of like making that number go up, go down, investing in companies with a certain ratio, all sorts of things you can do, that one makes a lot of sense to be like an objective measure, whereas the rest are definitely a lot more like certainly subjective.
A little bit more, right? Like social, you have some objective sides to it. Like what's your ratio of diverse employees? What's your gender balance at your executive level? That's kind of social. That's pretty easy to measure. But other things like what impact do you have on your community? Like dollars donated, is that volunteer hours? Is that you fund a food bank? Like that's kind of tricky to measure. Governance, also there's something that you can measure well. Like, do you have a team on your board of directors that oversees X, Y, or Z? But some of it's also very complicated to measure. Like, how many their compensation structure? Why does the CEO make 500x what the lowest paid employee does? It might be a good thing. It might be a bad thing. Some businesses should do that. Some businesses shouldn't do that. And so it's a little bit more complicated. And there's a lot of pushback on ESG lately for some political reasons that are mostly nonsense, and for some good reasons, which is like it's a limiting framework. I think I saw something from the CEO of Coca-Cola when he was asked on I think a quarterly call of like, are you backing away from your ESG investments because the pension fund of Texas firefighters that they don't want to invest in ESG things anymore? And the Coca-Cola CEO basically responded saying, I don't totally care what you call it. It is good for our customers to use less sugar in our products. It's good for our company if we have more women at higher levels of the business. It's good for our company if we have like take less water out of aquifers and reservoirs so that those communities are better. We're just going to do this stuff that's good for the business and call it ESG. Don't call it whatever you want. Let me know what you want me to put on my report. We're going to continue doing all this stuff because it's good for our business to do so. And that's more important on subtext of this conversation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that where you run into those challenges politically or when you make the whole bundle important and then you include stuff in the bundle that's controversial. But when you unbundle it in terms of like, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. It's just when you force people, when you put the bundle includes a lot of things, but when you list them out, you can definitely make it sound like one thing or the other.
Or don't take a stance on good or bad. Like a bill just got introduced in California like 2 days ago. It basically says by 2025 or 2026, companies that do over $1 billion that have business in California, not that are based in California, but that do business in California, are going to need to report on their carbon emission. They're not saying your carbon emission needs to be below X number and they're above Y number, you get fined. They're just saying this matters to our investment community. This matters to us as regulators. We want to know your number, and then investors can decide for themselves. Do you want to buy high carbon businesses? Do you want to sell off your high carbon business? Like, make that decision for yourself. We're just talking about transparency. So that's why a lot of this climate regulation stuff is actually happening under the auspices of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the part of the government that regulates publicly traded companies. It's not happening in the Consumer Protection Agency, and it's not happening from the EPA, the Environment Protection Agency. It's happening from the SEC. All the SEC is saying is not put good labels and bad labels, just that we're going to put a number on things, and investors can decide for themselves if they care about the number, they don't care about the number, how much they want to value that number. Like, this is purely about transparency, and investors can decide for themselves what to do with that number. I think that's the important side. And if there's investors who say, I don't care, I don't look at that number, all I look at is the bottom line growth potential, great. Awesome. Full freedom to go do that. And if there's investors who say, nope, we don't invest in businesses that have emissions intensity, which is your total carbon emissions divided by a certain numerator or denominator. Maybe it's revenue, maybe it's number of stores, maybe it's number of employees, that's your emission intensity. Maybe then some investors say, hey, we have an emission intensity limit of 100 metric tons per dollar of revenue. Cool. Right. You can do that too. When it's just about transparency.
Yeah. I think that it's definitely important to think through second order consequences of that. Because, a lot of things that start out seemingly harmless can go in all sorts of directions. So it's just worth considering just in terms of increased information requirements on things, because there's just all sorts of, there's ways to get sneaky. I think in terms of fully digitizing currency as well, with kind of a similar one that you can think for a day of all the benefits, but I don't necessarily have the ones that come to mind. I'm just seems like another important piece of information to give, just information, and transparency also is a mechanism of control in some respects. And so it's important to think, is it necessary for this to be required to share this information?
For sure. I'll play the devil's advocate to my own self there. There could be negative things that come from this. It's super easy to play this game and measure what you want to measure. So you set what's called your operational boundary when you do carbon accounting. You say, hey, in my business, we are going to measure this. And this is something kind of important for our business, but we're going to ignore it this year. It's just a little bit separate. We don't want to take ownership over it. Like your suppliers, for example, like maybe you do want to include the emissions that from your, like, I don't know, whatever material this is, your aluminum provided an extra much, or maybe you're like, yeah, that's not really us. Companies that decide to include their suppliers are going to have a much higher carbon footprint than companies that decide to ignore their suppliers. So all of a sudden, the companies that are ignoring the suppliers seem like they're businesses, which is not true at all. They just decided to make their operational boundary different. It's super easy to mess with the accounting of this and say, this is good, this is bad, this is whatever. I think the point being, or the effort, the philosophy behind this effort of regulators, this stuff existed in Europe for probably a decade. It's been talked about in the SEC for about 2 years, and maybe California for about a year. The point that they're making is that climate is going to be a really important input into decision-making for consumers and for investors over the course of the next 50 years. There will be really a lot of buying decisions and investment decisions that bring climate into effect. So let's begin bringing some transparency to that. And counting was a very flawed system, but it had like 500 years of being figured out. It was invented by like Venetian merchants who were just trying to like keep track of how many ships came in and out and what they brought and sold or whatever. And it took hundreds of years and many, many mess ups to get to modern financial accounting. It's going to take a similarly long time, maybe half the amount of time, to get to a state of like status quo and normalcy in corporate carbon accounting. And there's going to be lots of mess ups and lots of rulemaking and lots of like under the table, gray hat accountants helping you. And there's going to be so many people who are like, look, like the point of that, like, look, this is the problem. Like, this is the issue. See, this is why we shouldn't be doing this. And I will go to those people and say, Enron happened 20 years ago. And nobody says accounting is a bad thing. We just say we need to work on our accounting standards. Let's improve them. I say the same thing for corporate carbon accounting. There's going to be lots of mess ups. There's going to be lots of faulty things. There's going to be lots of liars. There's going to be lots of fraud. There's going to be lots of honest brokers who get the short end of the stick for whatever reason. And yet it's important as we kind of move into a new green economy, which is one of the largest financial opportunities and risks if it's gotten wrong for the next century.
I think that's a really good framing. There's a lot of things, we got to start and zoom out and be like, what can we all agree on here, right? It's like, if you're using excess resources in a completely unnecessary way, that's super unnecessary.
Yeah. I mean, if you're dumping waste in a river, well, that's a bad example because that's regulated. If you are, business travel is a good example, right? So like business travel is something you measure the emissions of when you're doing your corporate carbon accounting. And you say, how much do I travel? What are the emissions of that trip? If you are a business, let's say you're a consulting business, and you own a private jet, which is not uncommon in professional services, gets your executives around faster, and you own a private jet, you have really high business travel emissions, whereas your competitor does not own a private jet. And their rule is that you can only travel if you're a vice president or above. And so their travel emission, their carbon footprint, is 1/10 that of their competitor. The competitor with the jet is more than welcome to have their jet. Like, go for it. If you think that's the best way to run your business, you'd have your jet. But everyone should be aware that if they go with your business, the emissions are going to be 10x higher than if they go with a competitor's bid. So now they're making the decision based on the quality of your service and say, oh, I'm going to choose the consultants with the jet no matter what, because they're a better consultant. I don't care about emissions. But many other businesses are going to say, you know what, like the consultant without the jet is an equally good consultant. And I want a consultant who is more sustainable and has fewer emissions. So I'm going to choose the consultant without the jet. My point of all of this is to say businesses should do whatever decision they think is right for their business. And for many, that decision will be to reduce emissions wherever possible so it doesn't impact the business. You should have never traveled. You got to travel to see clients. And it's good for the business and it has emissions. What are you going to do about it? But you should be more thoughtful about your travel. And I, as a potential customer or the potential investor, should know how you think about this.
It makes sense. I'm with you on your previous points of accounting had a 500-year arc. And this is, I don't know how many orders of magnitude more complicated, but probably several orders of magnitude more complicated to keep track of. Because again, the supplier issue is just one. It's like, well, if the plane that you're on, like what it takes to make that, you can go, there's no clear place to like I mean, I guess there is a point of stopping maybe, but if you like take every potential measurement to the conclusion, it's
super complicated.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Because then again, well, you can analyze the work being done, right? It's like, what if the work being done that they're traveling to do is building renewable energy or some other thing that, or, some policy advocacy that is going to offset 10 decades. Like they're traveling to conduct a deal to build the biggest rainforest ever built. It's just the externalities are very, very, very difficult to keep track of. So I'm definitely with you that like, there's a lot of fundamentals that I think are easy to agree to. It's just how enthusiastically we should adopt extreme things quickly that I'm just really slow on for now, I'd say.
Yeah. I think that's entirely fair. Like it's an issue. It's really difficult to compare two businesses against each other in carbon emissions because there's so many things you don't understand, so many things you don't know, so many things that you can measure the same thing in two different ways. So if you and I are competitors and we're equal in every single way and we're doing our carbon footprint analysis and you tell an external carbon accounting company that you spent $1 million on business travel last year, and I am able to get better data, and I tell that carbon accounting company, if you notice the money I've spent, it doesn't matter. I flew exactly 100,000 miles last year. We're going to get two very different numbers. Like, because my 100,000 miles is a very specific number. Your $1 million is kind of difficult to understand. You spend $1 million on the jets or on, flying economy. And so all of these are issues, 100%. But I think the thing that's a takeaway, I suppose, is that while all these issues are getting figured out, companies still need to figure them out as we get, like, they need to look at them and do them. And they could push back and they should participate in the process. And the SEC, in April of 2022, kind of released so about a year and a half ago, released this climate disclosure bill for comment. And it was open for comment for about 6 months. That's kind of standard. When the SEC wants to release something, they open up a comment period. And what's interesting is that for this climate bill, there were like 15,000 companies that submitted comments. A week after this climate disclosure bill, a bill that came out about cybersecurity from the SEC, also a very important topic for investors. The SEC said, hey, we're thinking about the cybersecurity bill. 6-month open comment period. They had fewer than 1,000 comments received on the cybersecurity bill over the course of their 6-month open comment period. The comment bill is like 15x more controversial, beneficial, thoughtful, needed work, whatever. But you as a company, yes, if you're large enough, you have the resources, like have a voice, discuss it, talk about the problems, make it better, show how you're doing it, figure it out, but also realize that if you're a business that has aspirations to go public, that wants to serve the Fortune 500 because all of them are making their customers report on the data, that wants to get private equity money, because many private equity firms have European money that come into the firm, and that European money demands that any investment report on its carbon emissions. Like, you're going to have to figure this stuff out. You're going to have to do it. And let's all make it better and push back and say, hey, like, go a little slower. Let's figure out what we can do. What are the pros, what are the cons? All that should be on the table, and your company, your listeners' companies, should be as vocal and passionate and thought-provoking as they want to be, as the 15,000 comments to the SEC were. Most of them, which were overwhelmingly positive, by the way. I think it was like 84% positive, 16%, and anyway, critical. You should be open about it, but you also need to be very aware that this is going to be super critical for your business to figure out.
What's motivated you to take on all of this? The book, the career in sustainability?
Planet Earth, actually. Not like our Planet Earth. It was like a Netflix documentary series called Planet Earth. With Sir David Attenborough narrated it. Okay. It was a beautiful piece of content ever. And I remember watching it like 12, 15 years ago, being like, oh my God, like this is just such an incredible thing to work on. And it ends with this, like, how do we get better episode. And it's just the most beautiful episode 10 of season 1 of Planet Earth. Like the single most inspired piece of content I've ever watched. Shortly after that, I started my first company in the sustainability world. It was like in the environmental land use space. Did that for a while, did an electric vehicle company for a while. And I left the industry and worked at Stripe for a little bit at FinTech. And Stripe wasn't for me. I'm having to talk about life, what went wrong in a big company, but like wasn't my speed. And as I was thinking about leaving Stripe, I basically said I want to work in FinTech because it's really interesting and important and supports entrepreneurs, which I really love, or in climate because it's all the things I really love. And those are the two industries also that like are booming and exploding on their own. And tons of career opportunities in those two industries. I thought about those two a little bit, and I really moved towards climate because it's something I cared a little bit more about and like felt more personally. As I looked at the climate space, there are a few categories that you can really have an impact on in climate. You can work in material sciences, you can work in food, you can work in supply chain. Or I saw this was in 2021 or so, and there's this regulation starting to be discussed. There's this wave of carbon accounting startups coming out, and it just seemed like a really interesting challenge in industry to get into, to be able to work on that. So almost 2 years ago, I started working at a carbon accounting startup, and we do exactly this kind of stuff. And the book was basically, I couldn't sleep. I was November 25th and looked at this because somebody asked me the other day, and I couldn't sleep. And I sent myself a Slack message saying like, there should be a book about all this stuff. And so the next day I just started writing it. And it was basically like, everybody in the world needs to do this. Whether or not you want to, this is not an emotional plea. Like you you want big customers, you want to private equity money, you want to go publicly, you want to work in Europe. You just have, if you're a big enough company, have to do this. Like it or not, you have to. It's super confusing. You don't know what to do. You don't know how much it's going to cost. You don't know how to budget for it. You don't know what good looks like or what bad looks like. And companies like the one I work for, we cost tens of thousands of dollars, which for some is a good price, for some is a bad price, for some is a good price, and they could do it for free for a year and they don't need us. Like there's just a group of people who could start off and learning exactly what it is that they're going to need to do. There's a growing group of people who work full-time in ESG and sustainability who needed a resource and a path in, and students who wanted to get into it. Sustainability titles are some of the highest paid titles in tech and in industry right now. It's like, and I think it's like the biggest title that pays over 7 figures in Fortune 500. It's a massive, massive need, career opportunity, business opportunity, all that stuff. And the goal of the book is to bring it all together and saying like, look, if you're going to get started on this book should get you started. What you do next, you got some options. You could be gung ho, you could be passive, you could whatever, but like, if you just need to know the state of play, this will probably be true for about 2 years, and then it's going to be outdated. If you need to know the state of play, here's where to start.
What's the size of company where it starts to be like, you have no other option?
If you are about a year out from taking private equity money or beginning to file for an IPO, that's kind of where you begin to have no option. Before that, there's other reasons to do it. You might want to, but like that's where like you really have no option. Or if you are an enterprise, if your client is an enterprise, if you sell to Fortune 500, you also probably have, or to the government, you also probably have no option because both like massive enterprise companies, Fortune 500 or 1000, and the federal government require that their vendors report on their carbon emissions. So if you want to sell to Salesforce or to Microsoft, or if you do more than $7 million of business with the federal government, you have to do all this stuff. So that's if you're selling enterprise or federal, or if you are about a year out from private equity money or IPO, that's when you really you have to do this within the next year or two.
Let's speak more about kind of regardless. Maybe some people are like, I don't care if this is a cluster of accuracy and inaccuracy. You got me excited when you said opportunity. They're like, whether or not he's right, wrong, or it's going to take 50 years or 100 years or 5 years to actually figure this out in a way that makes sense and minimizes unintended second order consequences of, let's say, like the increased information and all that stuff. I could do something here. It seems like it's a new thing that if you're just young and energetic and enthusiastic, there's stuff for you to do that could make a name for yourself. What are those opportunities that you see for kind of individuals, for businesses or for careers?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I'll start with careers, and we can turn to businesses. For careers, I think there's like two really, really important paths. The first is working inside of a company, a larger company on their sustainability team. These are well-paying jobs. These are important jobs. I talked about Apple earlier, like the highlight of their annual event was their sustainability video that's been talked about a trillion times. That is all due to this large sustainability team. Like going inside of the company and helping them with their sustainability stuff, amazing career path. You could get a master's in this from a place like Columbia has an amazing program. Northwestern has all these schools, Stanford. John Doerr, the Kleiner Perkins investor or like Amazon and Google, just gave a gift of a couple $1 billion to Stanford to start a sustainability graduate school. Like this is a massive career opportunity to go work inside of these companies, helping them figure out how they're going to deal with the transition to sustainability. The second career path, I can dive into either one of these or talk about a business opportunity. The second career path is helping businesses reduce their emissions. So if you are more entrepreneurial, especially, you can work for a slew of startups that these massive companies are going to buy in order to help them become more sustainable. You can go work for material sciences companies that found, new ways to substitute plastic for some thing that made out of kelp or whatever. You can go work for carbon capture companies who are like removing carbon out of the atmosphere, stopping them underground and getting paid by the world's biggest companies to do that. You can go work for, there's tons of pure software companies that make code more efficient and storage more efficient that help these businesses save a bunch of money and a bunch of emissions. So if you're like earlier in your career, you have some wiggle room in what you do next, I would think about those two routes. If you're really good at the corporate life, incredible opportunities helping businesses figure out how they're going to deal with this stuff and going in-house. And if you're more like down with startups, and especially if you have hardware inclinations, but in software as well, working on helping them reduce their emissions are really the two massive opportunities.
What qualifies you for the second is, I guess, more obvious. It's like, would you be a good engineer, or just like, do you have a skill set related to the thing that company needs, right? Do they need a marketing person? Can you market? Do they need an engineer? Can you engineer? It's like, that's like hiring. It's do whatever you're good at those types of companies. The first is like, get this type of job. What qualifies a person for that type of job in your view?
Sustainability is very, it requires a lot of different skills. To figure out how to do sustainability well, you need to be somebody who can communicate well. You need to be able to be somebody who can take risks, to bring people together. There's this quote, I'm just going to read it because I pulled it up really quickly, of Korn Ferry, which is like one of the world's largest executive recruiting firms. They published this 30-page manifesto about a year ago around skills that a really good chief sustainability officer needs. Very relevant, right? It's in the book, chapter 7. But it says, to take calculated risk, using any opportunity, large or small, a combination of passion, risk, intolerance, and resilience is essential. Be the spider in the web. Know how to get traction at the highest levels. Shape, but don't deliver. PSOs are perceived as a chief translation officer, simplifying complex ideas and communicating the correlation between risk, trust, growth, and cost. And then there's a little bit more. But I love the line of be the spider in the web. Know how to get traction at the highest levels. Shape, but don't deliver. What sustainability teams do really well is build resources for all the other teams to make sustainability their core job. So if you work at a company and you're on the sustainability team, it's not necessarily about all the stuff that you get done. It's about how you help everyone else get their job done. How do you build a tool set for your finance team so that they can go out and do all the investor reporting, put their carbon emission data in their 10Ks, apply to CDP, or do that stuff that investors want? How do you go to your supply chain team and help them think about, hey, how do I get my goods on a truck instead of on a plane because that lowers emissions? How do I think through that? How do I go to my material sciences team and say, how do we experiment with this stuff? How do I go to my marketing team and I help them talk about the stuff we're doing in sustainability without them guiding through it because they don't want to get slapped with what's called greenwashing, which basically like means you're making up claims you don't totally earn, which has huge legal consequences and fines. But you want to talk about your sustainability work because there's a big ROI opportunity in that marketing communication. So that be the spider in the web, shape, but don't deliver, I think is one of the most important things. And you don't need a skill set in any one of these. Yeah, you had West Cow on the podcast and her big thing being spiky, right? That's how she talked about. Like you want to be the same thing, T-shaped or spiky or whatever you want. Like really focus on one area, be an amazing communications professional, be a great supply chain expert, be really, really good at finance. But most importantly, you need to be able to influence all the other stakeholders because everyone at the company is going to have to figure out how to get the data, reduce your emissions, talk about it properly, and everything else you're going to need to do.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm like thinking, I don't have a ton of big corporate background, so I'm like, that's not where I have. I'm like getting a bunch of people to agree on doing stuff that they're only half motivated to do. Is like you got to be really. It's a special skill set to take on that challenge every day and stay motivated to do it.
It's a special skill set and takes a lot. I mean, I was said very openly. I worked at Stripe for like 5 or 6 months, and it's just an important skill. Yeah, I was there. There were like 7,000 employees. And I joined a gung ho startup. I was working on a startup marketing team. I was like, oh, I'm not good at it. Like I was just not good at it. Too many people need to agree, and they're all so smart and so capable. And like, you got to bring them all on board, and it takes a while. Like it is super important that people like that are able to do that. But on the other side, and here too small of a business, you just don't need somebody like that. So like a startup does not need a full sustainability person. If you want to do this stuff, you outsource it and you make it easy on yourself. But the other opportunities of building the products that those massive companies are going to buy and implement to measure their emissions, to reduce their emissions, to talk about it well, that's more of a startup behind you.
In terms of your career and your framing, obviously you're clearly passionate about just the underlying cause of like, what can you do as one person to advance sustainability as a global cause, right? And this makes sense in terms of like, well, if I help other people do that. In terms of like career outcomes, is there anything specifically motivated by, or like the book motivates in terms of getting, do you think it positions you as a thought leader? Do you think it will lead to cool consulting? Like what's kind of the, or you just want, like, where's kind of your like strategic framing around putting the effort into this?
Yeah, I'll be super transparent. So I said earlier, I joined Acclaimed because I care about it a lot and it matters to me. But also because it just seems like one of the best career opportunities of the next 50 years. Like so much money. Like you could even think the largest bill ever passed last year was a climate bill. There's a ton of money going into it. And that sounds amazing. For anyone ambitious and whatever, like sounds amazing. So I joined the climate industry. I joined a company called GreenPlaces. I'm still there. It's great. We do carbon counting. So businesses measure their emission. And I'm director of sales there. So my job is finding new clients. Lots of ways to find new clients, cold emails, conferences, whatever else. A book is one way, probably the way that takes a lot more work than anyone wants to do, but it is one way to come across the thought leader. So the effort of the book is to say, besides that, I hope people read it and learn from it and do the stuff I care about. I hope they come across the book, or it gives me a speaking opportunity I wouldn't have otherwise, or there's no reason for you to have me on the podcast unless I have a book. Somebody gets the book, buys it, rents it, borrows it from a friend, whatever. The money on the book is really minimal. I'm probably going to average about $4 of profit per book. So if it's a super successful book, it sells 10,000 copies, which is what a really successful self-published book is. Like maybe that's 40 grand. Probably won't be anywhere near that. So that's the high end. So obviously the money's not on that side. What I do hope happens is people find the book. They call me. They say, how can I approach this? Not everyone's going to be a good client for us. Lots of companies will be too small, too big, wrong industry, whatever. A certain number of companies will be. And so my hope is that this brings in X amount more revenue into the company I work for. I'm in sales. I get X percentage of that. Great. The ROI is there. The other side of that is I'll be able to go speak at conferences and hopefully get some other speaking opportunities, some of which are paid. So some of these conferences, especially as you get better, if you want to see an important topic, you can make between $1,000 and $15,000 per conference. So cool. Maybe, you got a couple of those and that comes out. But then also longer term, as I think about my career in climate, it was really fun challenge to be able to conduct these interviews. I don't know. I interviewed like 80 people for the book to conduct these interviews, to read this ESG report, to figure out the state of play. And as I continue to start companies or join sales teams of startups, which is all we're doing, it's fun to be able to say, hey, I at this particular moment in time know more than 99.9% of people. There's always people who know more, but I have a really good understanding of this. That knowledge will expire in a couple of years, and that knowledge doesn't focus in certain industries. I know restaurants pretty well, but maybe I need a version of the book just for restaurants. I know software companies pretty well, but maybe a version of this book just for software companies would be really good. So I can continue to build on that. And whether I turn that into a career sales or I turn that into a career as a startup founder again, and I go, hey, I'm the guy who wrote the book and whatever, I think there's lots of ways in which it'll help. Some of it being a little bit of it being short-term financial, a lot of it being brand and opportunity and draw and connections. And I got to speak to people who I never would have, when you and I first met 3 years ago or something, and you were just getting started in a podcast. I told you I started a podcast as well many years ago. And I only did it because nobody wanted to talk to me just to talk to me, but everybody wanted to be on my podcast. And it was awesome and so true and such a cheat code. And the book is the same thing. A lot of hours put into it, but nobody wanted to talk to me just to talk to me. if you were down to talk to an author of a book, I think it's a decent, relevant book.
Relevant,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
I think podcasting is low enough effort in terms of getting started where it's worth it just to do it to talk to people. Probably not writing a book.
Yeah. I mean, like writing a book, all right. So November 25th, I had the idea. I basically started writing an hour a day minimum all the way through. Like maybe I missed 10 days between November 25th and June 1st, maybe. Some days I work running more than an hour a day. I didn't even tell anyone about it for at least 3 or 4 months. Just because I wanted to get to whatever it was, 10,000 or 20,000 words, that seemed legit. And it's a lot of stuff. So before you actually start doing it, you gotta be pretty committed to it because there's so many drop off points. Or the podcasting, you record 3 podcasts and you stop and that's okay. You can stop and you go to 3-episode show where you can keep going. With a book, it's 0 to 1. And even when you release it, even when you finally hit 1, you're actually really only at 0.6. I thought I wrote a book, you're done. Now I gotta, and I want to, I like it. It's part of the reason you do, but you gotta do the podcast, you gotta do the conferences, you don't even get to copy paste your chapters and put them on articles. You need to write totally new articles, for other people to be featured in there, whatever. So it's there's a lot of stuff.
Sounds fun overall in terms of, if the framing is clear enough, right? It's worthwhile. So doing a lot of authors kind of back to back past couple of weeks. So it's fun. Getting a lot of book breaks.
What'd you learn? What's what's the common thread about the authors?
I mean, I've interviewed, I don't even know how many authors. I could probably come up with it. I'd say more than 30 authors, not in the past couple of weeks, just collectively, right? I have a bookshelf somewhere. I'm going to point. I don't even know which. I'm disoriented. I'm going to say it that way. I think I live that way from here. But that many authors, I have a bookshelf, right? And I just have the bookshelf divided between authors I've interviewed and authors I haven't.
Cool.
Which is fun. And I haven't purchased every single book from every person I've ever interviewed. I've done most. A lot of them, it's been retroactive. So it's I interviewed them. And then, so let's say we didn't do this part 2 interview. You just published the book and you didn't reach out and I didn't know about it and whatever didn't happen. It's would I 100% go buy the book? Because then I'm well, I interviewed him 3 years ago before this book was even in his brain. So now I can just grow it. I'm not just trying to grow that part of the bookshelf for the sake of it.
Not just fun. It's just trophy sell.
Exactly. And it's nice because it stacks up, right? The podcast is digital. So it's scrolling. So it's oh, look at this list of episodes becoming longer to scroll through versus look at this stack of books becoming heavier.
Then I can move apartment to apartment. Yeah, that's the dream.
That's exactly. Let me just make this thing harder for myself every time I move. I actually haven't even unpacked the books and I've lived in this apartment for 2 weeks. That's unrelated. So
that's a separate issue.
The answer to the question, one answer to the question, and it's not necessarily something that, sometimes there's value in hearing the same answer over and over again because it just convinces your ego to stop overcomplicating things and stop looking for a complicated answer. But it's just you can't have a bad reason to write a book. It's just, it's kind of just with everything, right? It's you have to it's a difficult thing to do, even if you try to do a small book or a simple book. And if your why isn't clear, if you're not super motivated for it, then it's just not going to come through. And it's kind of I think a lot of things, there's a word I really like, undeniable. And then it's kind of and I think a very parallel sentence to that is only do X if it makes less sense not to do X. It only makes sense to write the book if it actually makes more sense to write the book than not to write. Not writing the book doesn't make sense. It's with your positioning, with your career path, with your career ambitions, with the fact that you did a lot of research and this book just doesn't exist right now. It just doesn't make sense now. With all the information and all the context, it really doesn't make sense for you to not write this book. A parallel for that, I think, in terms of software, I think a lot of people try to build really big software companies and platforms. So you've probably seen this for however much older than me you are, years longer than I have seen this. But
decades.
A lot of people try to build a platform for no reason. They're we're going to build a platform that does X. And there's because they just want to build a big software company versus no, the only reason I think to build a platform is because you've solve a problem for some group of people that is super, 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 super validated a million times over. And then it might make sense to generalize what you've built to apply generally. But it's start it valid. Yeah, I think so. It's kind of the same thing.
I don't know if you've got the same disease as I do, but I just start doing things once they come to my head way too quickly. And it's in some ways, the good thing is I have friends who talked about doing things for years and years and never get to it. And I've got the opposite problem where I'm just shooting the shit with a friend and we're boom, that's an idea. And I go home and I build the website just to mess around with it. pros and cons to that, certainly. But I made a mistake where like I had a previous startup where like I really shouldn't have started, or I should have like done it differently, been a little slower, whatever, done all I thought about how do we make this $1 billion company before I thought about how do we make this $1 billion company. So I made that mistake in the past. With this book, I did exactly what you said. Before I wrote even a thing about the book, I wrote, here's my goals. Like, this is a success if, I don't remember what they were exactly. There were 3 of them. It was, I want to be able to make X amount of revenue for GreenPlaces. I want to be able to get X number of speaking gigs at a conference. And I think it'll sell Y number of books. I think that was my third goal. Like, that's what this looks like. And if I can't do that, like if I don't think I can get X number of revenue, like, I don't know, I don't think it's worth my time just for some brand building, whatever. But if I do think with, 70% certainty that these can come true, then it's worth my time. And everything I did was about like that. There's also a thing that I like, the guy Sam Plor, who started a newsletter called The Hustle, which he sold to HubSpot, and now he has a podcast. And he got this thing where he talked about starting The Hustle. He was like, yeah, I thought it was like 13 or 14. He was like, yeah, I thought a newsletter could be a cool thing to do. I thought it'd be a good business. What I wanted to think about was, can I just sit down and write a newsletter every single day? Before I really committed to it, I was like, let me write a newsletter every single day. And so we did that for like 30 days. He wrote a newsletter for some of his friends. And then 30 days later, I was like, yeah, I think I could continue to write a newsletter every single day. Let me turn that into a business. And basically the same thing with this book. I do this thing all the time where I'm like, idea, I'm going to go start a business. Awesome. Like, I didn't want to do that again. I'd be like, idea, I'm going to go write a book. I'm telling everyone, like, I still want to do that. And so every day I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. I thought I'm not going to tell anyone until I'm at 10,000 words. And I got 10,000 words and I went, all right, yeah. And I keep doing this for another 90 days or whatever it's going to take to get to 60,000. And the answer was yes. And I kept on doing it, but I was super clear about my goals and I was super clear about my process. Like I forgot the name of it, Momentum maybe. I got a Google extension that counted up my words.
Oh,
I
nice.
said this how many days in a row you wrote. And I had to write every single day, even if it was just like 2 words at midnight because I had a crazy day. I sat down and I wrote those 2 words and I went to bed. But and I could not break that streak. And it was, I don't know, mostly sucked. Like mostly my wife wanted to go hang out and I was like, I haven't written yet today. Go hang out. I got to do this thing. Mostly it was no good. And I hope the payoff comes soon. But besides, you learned it, self-improved and all the good stuff we're also excited to do.
I think we'd be doing the people a disservice by making it sound like it was easier than it was to make it happen.
I tell friends, I've started, I don't know, 5 or 6 companies, and I tell friends who ask about it, I'm like, no, it all sucks. Like it's all like, you have to be addicted and like an absolute fool to do this because it sucks. Like, it doesn't suck is getting a paycheck that's really, really big and then going to happy hours with your office and then getting paid to fly to some sick conference in San Francisco. That doesn't suck. We should go do that. You know what does suck? Starting companies sucks. And writing books sucks. If you're addicted or you're insane or you really think that there's enough value in it, then and only then should you do it. But you shouldn't do it because, it's going to be such a great ride and the road for the daily. No, it all sucks. And you got to be honest about that. And if you are honest that it will suck, then you are fine. Like I'm doing 75 hard now. 75 hard. So I'm on day like 25 or something. So 75 days, workout twice a day. One has to be outside, 6 or die, drink a gallon of water, read 10 pages a day, and maybe I'm missing something. It sucks. And don't drink alcohol. Because it's not, I'm not doing it every day is a pleasure. I'm doing it because you gotta, whatever. If you do this every day, something will come out the other end. You gotta be very honest with the end goal and make it work.
Yeah, I wonder if I was in the middle of so I did 75 hard for the first time from like April to June or April to July of 2020. So a long time ago. So, and then I did phase 1 throughout in phase 2 and phase 3 in that calendar year.
Oh, you have gone. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was probably in the middle of one of them around the time that we did our podcast because we were somewhere between like September and November of 2020.
Something like that. Yeah.
And so I probably did phase 1 in that fall semester. So just,
yeah. What are the phases again? I don't think I'm going to do them because I don't feel like it. What are the phases of them?
Phase 1 is 75 hard plus cold shower, 5-minute cold shower. So like 5 minutes of cold water. So if you're going to get in the shower, warm first, and turn it to cold, it's like, don't start the timer until the water's cold.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't take 5 minutes to shower, but I guess I'm going to learn how to take longer, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, because you don't change anything, right? That's an important thing. You don't change anything. And then you do the power list, which is basically writing out your key items and doing them for the day. And so obviously you want to write those out in such a way that like you're able to complete them. Because like if something goes wrong, it needs to be like effort based, not like finish this. And then it's like a math. I was in school at the time, right? So it's like finish this problem. And then you like work on it for 4 hours and you don't figure it out. It's like you don't want to have to reset the challenge because you just couldn't figure out the computer algorithm in 4 hours that day. It just took 2 days to figure out. So it's like put at least a good hour into this or figure it out, right? So you kind of give like those conditions so that you don't set yourself up for failure, but also so you don't set yourself up for cheating and keeping it too easy. And then 10 minutes of visualization. So just like closing your eyes and just thinking about whatever it is you want to kind of visualize, manifest, whatever the word you want to imagine that you want to assign to that. And then also the core 75 hard activities.
Did you, after all that, after 9 months or a year or whatever of doing that activity?
And that's with phases on and off, right? It's like,
no. Was there a clear before and after for you? Was there a clear like this was me a year ago and this is me today, either physically or mentally or like that?
Well, I'm saying so. It's only the phases 1, 2, and 3 are only 30 days each. So it's only 165 days.
Easy.
It's only 165 days out of the year, out of the 365 that you're doing a 75 hard type thing. So sorry, there's 75 hard again in the sense of the same 6 daily habits of 75 hard, but only for 30-day intervals.
Okay, got it. Well, did you have? Were you like I am a new man? I've been reborn after this 165 days.
I gained a lot from it for sure. I gained a lot from it. I think if what's difficult is when you change too much all at once, it's really interesting because I'd graduated. So it kind of finished phase 4 or phase 3, which is the final step, maybe like end of April or beginning of April. And then, so then I had a month more school and I graduated and then I moved and all sorts of stuff. So just kind of like, I think if I had stayed in the same place, I would have carried that momentum a little more than just like road trip. I went back to my parents' house initially before starting a job or anything. So then like kind of living at home, kind of being more of a vacation mode, specifically living in Las Vegas of all places. So I think that had I kind of stayed in the same life routine, obviously there's a ton I learned from it that I still carry with me to this day of just like, if you're going to buy into a program, you have to buy in. And if you change anything, it's not going to work for you nearly as well as if you don't change anything. The importance of a daily streak versus a 3 times a week streak, there's just like clear yes, no criteria, clear success criteria. It's like, if I do this, I can feel good about today. And if I don't do all this, I can like, you don't want to work really hard all day and put in your best and still feel like a lazy position at the end of the day. Because you want to feel like you're winning. You want to feel like you're making progress. You want to feel like there's momentum. And so you kind of have to still apply a lot of those same types of thinking to the beginning of your day. I think the only thing is that as a naturally, I think this is maybe, I should interrogate this and call it an excuse or whatever it is. I found that as a naturally skinny person, 90 minutes of exercise was really hard to overeat, to compensate for, to not just get even skinnier. But also, I don't think that, I could just stretch, right? I considered stretching part of the challenge, and I think stretching is healthy and constructive and actually difficult if you are stretching in the right way. You're not just sitting there and like playing pretend and LARPing that you're stretching, but like if you're actually like mentally engaged in the stretch, then that's really constructive. And walking is fine and swimming is fine. And I think even ping pong is fine. So it's like you just have to add enough variety where you don't get like repetitive use injuries and also burn too many calories. But I'm a huge fan of the whole Andy Frisella complex.
Yeah, I like when people do the thinking for me. It's kind of what you were saying about like, yes, clear, yes, no, like you can't back out of it. I like that thing. It's just, here's a thing that tens of thousands of people have done and everyone's into it. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I don't need to think about, will I eat this or will I eat that? Or, this morning I told you my daughter slept terribly. My wife went to like a yoga class in the morning. I finally put her down and I was so tired. I was like, I don't ride this Peloton right now. I just don't think I'm going to be able to get my 2 workouts done today. If I like drag myself asleep onto the Peloton. No, nice. Like I didn't have to think about should I or should I not, or just like, yeah, I got to do it.
Exactly.
I'm a bit of an ant that way. I'll follow the queen and do whatever I'm told. And it's nice. It makes life easy. Strict rules. It's like it's a Jocko Willink, like this is letting people street on thing.
Yep.
Like if you are disciplined and if you write every day in your book, and you send your 10 outbound sales emails, if you just eat what you said you're going to eat, not other things, then you have the freedom to whatever it is you hope for the end result to be. But I'm not always good at it, but when I'm not, I try to be on it.
Yeah, a big thing that we talked about the first time was kind of like being an Ironman triathlete, which is something that you've done. I don't know if you've done that more than once or not. It's interesting because it's like there's no way, if there wasn't something that was a thing that other people thought of that you're like, oh, I could go do that thing. There's no way ever in any reason in your life you'd ever just wake up one day and say, I'm going to swim X miles, run a full marathon, and bike X miles and do all that today. Like, it's just because it's a thing that someone else thought about and you're like, whatever, I can do that. But you never come up with that and you never work that hard.
Like, I just like to collect badges. Like,
it's good. What else are you going to do?
I wanted, like, what's the challenge? Like, last week, my friend and I did a Murph, like the run a mile, 200 push-ups and 300 squats and the run of the mile. It's not because I thought of it. It was just like, oh, I've never done that. Like, yeah, let's get some Murph badge and then go to the next.
Yep, that's what the best workouts are. You just come up with something stupid.
Go to the like let's immediately after this, I'm going to a pole bar and then I'm going to do my outdoor workout, and I'm going to do 45 minutes. That's the outdoor workout minute. I'm going to do every minute on the minute, 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 squats, and then a minute rest.
And for 45 minutes?
For 45 minutes, yeah.
Oh, with a minute rest. Okay.
With a minute rest, yeah.
I'm probably going to do my first sprint triathlon. I've never done any triathlon, but in like 8 weeks, because I moved into a place that has a really big pool and it's on some biking trails, and I've been biking to work. So I'm like, all right, I'm biking, and now I can, there's no guarantee I'm ever going to live in a place that has a proper training pool at the complex.
The pool's clutch. Yeah.
So I'm like, that's the fun. Most inconvenient thing of triathlon training is like having to commute to a pool.
Well, I joined the YMCA because it had a pool, but so did all of Brooklyn. So the pool's always crowded and you're swimming like 4 or 5 to a lane. So now I don't even swim anymore because it's just crowded. So yeah, now take advantage of your situation.
Exactly. Just the convenience. So anyway, it's fun to talk about fitness and challenges. What's the, promoting the book, finishing 75 hard, getting your Murph improved. I was going to say, maybe I feel silly now with all that build up. Is there another challenge that's kind of on the roadmap, or is taking the book to the finish line and see it, not the finish line and then see what's next?
Fatherhood's been a big
that's a good one.
I'm obligated to mention that one. No, it's there. I'm glad
that one's got like a proper duration commitment as well.
Episode 3. That's 18 years. I've got 18 years of getting that badge. No, I'm pumped about the book, man. It was really hard. It took a full year. I started 10 months ago. It'll be out basically almost at the 12-month mark. This is fun. Like, I like doing this stuff. The carbon accounting thing, you can nerd out about it. Kind of like we went a nerdier route today. Like, is this good? Is this bad? How do you measure stuff? How do you compare this stuff? Last week I did a thing.
I do analytics. So, I'm like this.
No, it's cool.
I'm like, let's get into it.
You could talk about the regulatory side of it. You could talk about the marketing side of it. You could talk about and playing. Like, you did a million things to talk about. I'm excited to talk about all those things. I think it'll be fun to get as any egotistical young man, I like to go hear the sound of my own voice. Give my opportunity to do that in spades. And hopefully it's, spewing interesting and valuable content. But we'll find out in a couple of months if anyone ever invites me back. And that's cool. I'm excited to do this thing and like write the articles, promote the thing, do the conferences, book website and at attainablesustainabilitybook.com. I just got like some cool blurbs. The founder of Netflix gave a blurb, which I'm really
That's pretty cool.
proud of.
Which one?
Yeah. So Mark Randolph, he was the first CEO. I think he took it public, or maybe he left right before it went public, something like that.
Are there two? Because Reed Hastings is I don't know which one's which, right?
Yeah, so Reed Hastings is the CEO now, and Mark Randolph was the first.
Either one, a solid testimony though.
First investor, yeah, both of these things. Reed Hastings invested into Mark. Mark started it, spent like 5 or 7 years or something running it, and then Reed took it over. But yeah, like I'm just excited about it, and I hope people, I hope anybody who either is taking the career path in sustainability, like, I'm young, this is a cool career, what can I learn about it? Or you're like an executive or an investor who's like, I'm figuring this stuff out, what's the regulations, who's going to sue me if I get this wrong, like, how do I make this profitable for my business? Those are really the two groups. If you're like a student of the business, or if you're running the business and you're like, how do I get this right? I hope it's valuable.
You know, your pitch can be, if you're either of those people, it makes less sense not to read the book. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't.
If it doesn't make sense to do X, don't do X. Buy the book.
Exactly. So there we go. Well, Adriel, thanks for coming back on the show. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for condensing a really confusing, big, hairy problem and making people much further along in the process of understanding it in the span of 1 to 2 hours instead of hundreds of hours of research. And there you go. AttainableSustainability.com.
Attainable Sustainability book.
Book.com.
Yeah. Attainable Sustainability was too expensive.
Fair enough.
Maybe on the second edition, we'll upgrade.
Well, you can get a speaking gig, buy the domain.
Yeah.
There's a way to do it.
Yeah. Hey, Lewis and Kyle show. It's good to be back. Thank you, man.
Amazing.